Broadcasting plays an important role in the development and advancement of women.
Our voices as women in broadcasting are important to ensure that diverse content is included.
The kind of work we do in broadcasting allows us to rewrite history.
Our strength is in our unity, and women can defy the odds.
See expressions sithi halala zimbokodo, halala maqhawekazi. Happy Women's Month.
We are totally against the opening of private schools while public schools are being shut down. These learners, they might be paying school fees, but they are not rubber cops. They are not robots, so they are also vulnerable to coronavirus, to COVID-19. So we don't know whose interests are being protected by bringing learners to school. Is it the interest of this private private institutions, or is it in the interest of teachers who are teaching these private institutions or the learners?
I think it's unfair because if you really think about it, while the public schools are closed, we are open, right? And where I live at home, I have my grandma and my mom. My grandma, she's a bit sick, she's weak, and I have to come to school. I'm forced to come to school so I can get an education. And that, what does it say about my grandma? What if I contract the virus?
It is showing that on our educational system, very equal, you understand? It is showing that the private schools, they are more special than us in public. It is showing us, or government, they are on elevated economy more than our students' lives.
Public school parents are taking it. It's fair that they close and we continue to go to school because our parents are not complaining about us going to school. They are allowing us to go to school, and they are also online learning, so you can stay at home and still learn. So it's okay for us to go to school. We are just like any other human beings. Our immune systems are not any different. We can get the coronavirus, we can get affected from the coronavirus, and I think he should have just closed all the schools.
Even parents must take an important role in their children's life.
I heard that there's 6 confirmed cases, but yet you are still coming. They are not even closing for at least 14 weeks.
Private schools cannot open while public schools are closed. The main reason why the private schools are still opening now is because their businesses, they only care about maximizing profits. They don't care about their lives. And then I want to send a message to all learners across the country, is that you must sleep and wake up again.
So, as the debate about the opening and closing of schools continues to rage on, Jobanis Bonela, we're at a field and there's some young people playing Lapaya. Clearly, they're not at school. We continue to have this conversation as expressions with COSAS Namhlanje, and we are with the Secretary General, Opututeboho. You join us today on Expressions. Thank you so much for your time, Budwami.
Thank you very much for having us on the Expression today.
So, Budwami, schools open and there's a surge in infections, COVID-19, and then schools get closed again, and then there's an announcement for grades 12, and then COSAS has a problem. What is the problem?
Look, as the student movement, our problem is that most of people that generating profit through PPEs. We consulted with Department of Basic Education that grade 12 must go to academic camps as they are moving to tertiary institution from pre-tertiary. But because this thing is a business approach, that's why they're allowing kids to go to school.
When the president made the announcement, schools would be closing once again, the announcement was pertaining to public schools. Wathiwa-ke ama-independent schools wona azoqhubekela phambili, and that was also something that didn't sit right in the COSAS. Why?
We believe that the president has promoted inequality within the education sector, because when we were saying total shutdown, we're not saying only public schools. It is saying to us those kids who understand poverty, they must continue to suffer. Remember, education is our last hope as the society. If we are saying public schools must close, then private must continue, what are you saying? If I can tell you that the biggest secret, their kids are not in public school. They are in private schools. That's why he was saying on behalf of the Command Council, private schools must not close. They must continue. It shows that we still have inequality in the country.
At some point you guys wanted to go and protest outside Ikolo Elizabeth Qhubekela Phambili ngokufunda. Wasn't that in a way also infringing on i-right yabafundi labo in the private schools to education?
Look, what is the difference between a child who is in a private school or public school? Because when they go and apply in university, they don't care that you are from a private school or a public. The problem is inequality here. If they are saying kids from public school must not go to school and those ones that are going to school, still they are infringing with their rights of education. What we want is that we must have quality in the education system. We want IEP to be scrapped. All learners in the country, they must write under Umalus, National Senior Certificate, because we have only one Minister of Basic Education, which is MENG. We don't have a Minister of Private Schools. So why we must have inequality in our schools, whereby we have those who are writing IEP, those who are writing senior certificate, and we've been calling that kids must have tablets so that they can access for in industrial revolution, but they have not done that. That's our call, and grade 12 must go to academic camps. That's our call.
Should private schools be open whilst public schools are closed?
No, remember, COVID doesn't choose that you have a medical aid or you don't have, or you're in private school or public school. It will affect you, and hence we are saying that all schools must not be open. If those who are in private, they are open, why they can't close while our public schools that are closed? All of them, they must close.
Grade 12s are being prioritized right now. What does this mean for them?
Remember that academically we are not the same. We have those who will take time to catch up, and we know when they are in the academic camps, they'll be ready to write. But now most of our kids are not ready, because when that school has been affected, it will be closed, tomorrow open, closed, open. So it's bad.
And what does COSAS think would be the end product or the repercussions of this entire situation as it is right now, particularly for abantwana baku public schools?
If these kids are continuously going to school, remember that others, they are moving from one area to another area, and now we are in a peak season and we have wind. This thing is dangerous when there is wind. It's what other scientists are saying. So kids will be more affected more than anything. Hence we are saying that they must go to academic camps where the movement is limited. They go to class, go back where they are sleeping, so the movement will be limited. But our elders don't want to listen to us, but they must listen to us. At the end of the day, what is important, those kids, their lives matters and the education matters.
So that was Tebogo Magafane, obviously highlighting the very stark differences between public as well as private schools. We continue with this also important conversation after the break. We'll be back right after this. You are watching Expressions.
Open because we pay a lot of school fees, and like we don't want to repeat the grade. Our parents wouldn't be happy for us to exactly pay the amount for the same grade.
We are crying with those learners who are paying their school fees. Ne? That's the other thing. They chose private schools, but not because of it's their choice in a way, but because of their parents believe that in private schools there's more, there's quality education more than in public schools, which set a very wrong example.
It's unfair because we will be forward, and then us we will keep on moving, but then they will stay. So it's not fair to them, and it's also not fair to us because we are at risk of getting sick.
Personally, I feel like they should stay open because like we can like get a head start on like other terms work, and we can like have an advantage during the year.
It is clear that our schools are not equal. We want to know what is the reason for these schools why should they open?
We have lost a lot, especially in the school. Like the e-learning hasn't really, for me, the e-learning hasn't really been a good option. So I suggest that the schools be open, and I like how they run things, although sometimes it's just mixed up and we don't really know where to go.
Everybody's scared of COVID, but like we have to face the brighter side instead of like worrying about what happens if we die and all that. There's life before COVID and there's gonna be life after COVID.
I prefer being at school rather than being home because I've been at home for like, I think it's 4 months now, and I don't like staying at home. At least I can go out and have fresh air.
We are going to use anarchy. We are saying forward with anarchy to use anarchy in a way. Or forward with anarchy to defeat anarchy. That's our modem for now. Because of it cannot be correct that we are busy trying to engage people who are not interested in engaging us. Because of the president is very wrong. He cannot create this thing of discrimination.
So, as we continue to have this very important discussion with Nobaba Manju Mandla Mthembu from the National Alliance of Independent Schools Association, NAISA, Baba Sikbingelela sikwamukele ku-Expressions. We continue to have this very important conversation. The burning question is, should private schools remain open whilst public schools close or open in a phased form?
Well, maybe it's not a matter of should or should not. It's a matter of how do we salvage whatever is left of the academic year. When we look at independent schools, are they able to continue to provide teaching and learning at this point in time? And what is our circumstance? And one of the things that we try to do as much as possible is to provide a secure environment for our children.
So, Mthembu, student unions such as COSAS come out and say they're going to disrupt teaching and learning in private institutions. What would your response be to that?
That is very unfortunate, and I believe that COSAS is ill-advised to even try to do that, because independent schools have not just continued to open by themselves, but it was a decision of government.
This whole topic has also sparked a debate of, the rich and poor, how everything becomes imbalanced at some point. What would your take be on that?
Well, I think that we need to address the issue of inequalities in a way that appreciates the historical context. You cannot talk about inequality in this country as though it began now, when the president announced that public schools will have to close and independent schools continue. Inequality has been with us, for as long as you and I can remember, And I think that is a political question, actually.
How do we, bridge the gap between these both sectors? Because you did say that the private sector was hit the most because it relies solely on the funds that are being put in by school fees and even payments for teachers as well, as opposed to the public sector where, our teachers get their salaries as is. How do we bridge the gap?
We need to think out of the box. I know for a fact that independent schools have even had what we term twinning programs. What is a twinning program? It's where a school that is well-to-do pairs up with a school in a township, where you've got learners even coming to your school to use your laboratory, which are not there in a township school. and even exchanging with sports and everything, and even having teachers going to teach in a township school or a school which is less to do than a private school. All of those programs have been introduced to try and help to uplift those who are not sort of in a fortunate position to have all the resources they need. That's just one way. But the other thing that is very important is there's a need for our government to improve the quality of education in the public space.
Let's speak about the impact of COVID-19 and children in the private sector also not being able to go back to school. There are reports of how some teachers, went under with debt and things like that. Speak to us about the impact.
The impact has been quite severe. We've got schools that have literally closed down. They can't continue anymore because of the loss of income. Right now, the payment rate in terms of school fees from private to independent schools stands at between 20% and 30%. And you cannot run a school with that amount of money. You have to pay school teachers' salaries, overheads, and everything else. So some of the schools really have had to cut down on salaries, where teachers are actually getting salaries which are cut down to plus minus 45% of what they used to get. And you find that other teachers have been retrenched because schools no longer need their services, not because they don't have the skills, but because many parents have taken learners out of the normal schooling environment, put learners in an online platform, number one, at home. Number two, others are homeschooling their children. We've got teachers who call us sometimes who are having cars being taken back by banks, who are having threats of houses being sort of taken back, So at the end of the day, it's been really hard. Our teachers are adding to the unemployment line.
So clearly, teachers within the private sector education are feeling the brunt of COVID-19. As we've heard in that insert, a lot of them are facing retrenchment. So nobody seems to be safe, whether they're in the public or the private sector, when they are facing this issue around COVID-19 challenges. We continue with this very important conversation after the break. You're watching Expressions. We'll be back.
Schools will be closed from the 27th July and will reopen on the 24th of August. There are, however, some exceptions. Specific arrangements will be made for different categories of special schools.
So the South African Democratic Teachers Union, as the lead teachers union in the country, has been vocal about ensuring both teacher and learner safety in our schools. They've also come out to say they've supported the Department of Basic Education's decision to ensure that kids go back to school, but have also said that they will not hesitate to call for schools to close again should the surge of COVID-19 get out of hand. At the back of inequalities in our education system and the status as far as COVID-19 and teacher and learner safety is concerned, we are here to get some answers today. Let's go speak to them. Mr. Malulega, thank you so much for your time on Expressions today. The big question we're asking namhlanje kwi Expressions, should private schools remain open whilst public schools are closed?
In our view is that the children are not different. Those who are in the independent schools and those who are in public schools, or sometimes they come from the same family, they travel in the same transport, and therefore it is not advisable that the independent school remain open while the public schools are closed, because the teachers that are there in the independent school are not immune to the virus at all.
All right, Mr. Malulega, so SADTU has on many occasions been accused of grandstanding and also holding the government at ransom. We also know, Wuti, there's an announcement that we see private schools opening and public schools closing. What do you think needs to be done in order for us to bridge the gap?
Well, before I go to bridging the gap in terms of inequalities, is that we need to understand why the independent schools remain open. They remain open because they want to collect school fees. Some of them are business. They are listed in the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, for example, your PSG. So clearly it is that it's in their best interest to continue to be getting fees so that their shares do not depreciate at the level of that. So what we need to do to ensure that we bridge this particular gap is to ensure that our public schools are well resourced. That's the most important part of it, so that at least they are able to access education if the school is closed down, in terms of other platforms like your TV, your radio, your online, your e-learning and distance learning and so forth. That is how we can begin to close the gap that it is there.
Most of our children in public schools don't really have access to your laptops, don't really have access to your tablets, and let alone internet, and that continues to also be an issue. How are we planning to address this, or perhaps maybe what's SADTU's standpoint as far as that is concerned?
Yeah, that's a very important question, because what we have been doing throughout these 2 weeks has been engaging with businesses to then say, are they willing to come into the party and donate the SIM card for the rural schools. We have seen them coming up and volunteering to do that. So in a few weeks' time, we might be able to see some of our students in the rural areas receiving SIM cards that are zero-rated, that they can be able to access portal information and begin to be learning while they're still at home. That's one of the areas that we are working on. The other area is to really structure the radio lessons so that they become interactive. When you're dealing with the rural learners, the radio is the most important source of information, and we need to change how the radio can be used to ensure that they are able to receive education. So we need more money in education. We cannot have an education system that parts with about 2.1 billion away from education, when every country, when they are reopening, they have pumped billions into education in ensuring that the social distance, in ensuring that there are more teachers in our schools so that they are able to help the children.
So as we're having this conversation, we're having it on the basis of which we assume ukuthi wonke ama-learners anayo access to radio, and that is not the reality. The reality is abanye abafundi in rural areas don't have ama-radios bonke. So how are we going to ensure ukuthi we have an inclusive environment la ngeke khona basalele emuva ngemfundo zabo?
I think it's doable. I think it's highly possible to be able to provide those particular resources. First and foremost is that we must deal with corruption. We must ensure that the money that is being stolen by those people who have got no conscience is directed towards education.
There's that question about how teachers expect to be paid when they stay at home. That was a very hot potato at that time. What would SADTU's standpoint on that be?
Okay, for me, it is that teachers have never asked for overtime. Teachers have never complained to the government when they are working on weekends. There are schools that people sleep in the school during the weekend, and we need to appreciate that when they come January and they shine as MECs and ministers about the results that are up. It is not because of them. It is because of those teachers who were sleeping at the school, who were sacrificing their family time and sacrificing their children to some extent, because they have to provide for the learners who don't have anything. If a learner comes to school without a pen, the teacher does not go to government and say, look, the learner does not have a pen. The teacher buys a pen for that teacher. Because with the teachers, they become attached to the children. They become attached to their learners, and that's why they work more than 9 hours, more than 15 hours, because they love their children.
Mr. Maluleke, thank you so much for your time and expressions, and do keep safe.
Thank you so much.
Today we've got so much. We've got so much from COSAS. We've got a lot from the NAISA. We've got so much as well from SADTU. So it's all now up to you, and we've brought you all the analysis as well. And we thank you so much also for your participation in From all of us here at Expressions, we wish you a spectacular evening going forward. Nsalekahle.